Well, here's my 1968 Mercedes 108. This is what we're going to be taking for a cruise today to go run some errands. It's my 68 MG Mark III and my 87 Nissan, which my dad bought new when I was born. I always like driving this car. Oh, look, my dog's already ready to go with his frisbee. As you can see, all the lights work like a dream. Starts right on up. The only thing that's not original, but I still have the original, is the stereo. I actually have it in the back of the trunk, but upgraded to a vintage looking yet new Bluetooth system. What's up, everybody? So a lot of people ask what is it like owning a classic Mercedes? And it truly is a fantastic car. With anything vintage, of course, there's a higher inherent maintenance schedule, per se. But in reality, it's not that bad. I've owned this car, believe it or not, since 2010. Which is kind of crazy. It's gonna be 11 years next month. And if I think back at the maintenance that I've done with this car over the years, is pretty minimal. You know, I would say you do your basic maintenance, such as oil changes, valve adjustments, rubber gaskets. Anything rubber is gonna become brittle, especially being nearly half a century old. But altogether, Mercedes truly built a very robust car. The engine is incredible on these. And of course they are known for the OM617, which is the 300D turbo diesel engine and non-turbo, which, you know, they call them the million-mile motors. But these gas inline sixes are also, I would say, in par with the diesel engines. I truly have done nothing serious on these. Now, with anything, I would say, maintenance-wise, where there is a catch with these vintage Mercedes, and that's where I would say some of the cons are. Parts are getting somewhat harder to find and nearly impossible to find in some areas for the 108s. There are still some, but a perfect example is I needed a governor on a transmission issue that failed a few years back, and it was shifting in a way where it wouldn't go into the next gear. Thought it'd be a simple fix. It is a simple fix to get the transmission out. Finding the actual part turned out to be kind of a nightmare, and the next factor that kind of made it even more of a nightmare was the cost of the part. On a normal transmission, say a 2001 Mercedes, this part would maybe be 150 bucks. It was nearly 950 bucks for this same part. So yeah, things get expensive if they break. I had an oil pump main drive gear fail on this. I caught it because I watched the oil pressure gauge drop when I was cruising down the highway. I was hot rodding it. I was doing like 104. So obviously the motor is at like 5,600 RPMs. I'm kind of to blame for that. But oil pump main gear broke, oil pressure dropped, shut the motor off. I did not hurt the motor near as bad as if the motor was still running at those speeds. That was another expensive fix. The biggest bill that I've truly had with this car is 2,100 bucks, which to some is like, holy cow. But inevitably, those are the main factors I've had to do. In a 10-year span, I've only had 2 major, and I wouldn't even call them major, repairs. Other than that, the trick to keeping these running is drive them. People will buy these things and then they sit. They sit in a garage and they never use them. They're like, oh, I'll take it off, it's a nice Sunday. Every 4 months, they'll maybe start it up. Every 6 months, they'll maybe take it for a nice drive. I religiously drive this car once a week, multiple times a week if I can. In the summer, fall, I'm driving this thing all the time. And I think that is the longevity trick to these, keeping it running. This car loves to be driven, and I love driving this car. So if you're thinking about getting one of these, I'll give you a walk around of mine and kind of point out the main factors to look for in one of these. And it'll kind of give you some insight of what to do and what to look out for. And there's different variants, and you know, overall they're great cars. You got to keep in mind they're half a century old now, and parts will break, parts are hard to find, but overall I don't think you're gonna see a Hyundai Sonata half a century from now still cruising on the road. So that kind of says something to me about the build quality of these. They're amazing machines. They drive amazing. They're an absolute joy. And honestly, one of my favorite factors, I'm gonna have to do a video on it, is the respect that this car gets. It's incredible. You go to a JDM meet, people are like, oh my gosh. You cruise Cherry Creek Boulevard, which in Colorado is the nice area. Guy with a brand new AMG is like, oh my God, I want that car. So I think that's one factor that has made me smile in all the years of ownership of this car, is how people just light up like a Christmas tree when they see this thing. And it's just downright amazing that they respect this car so much. You know, people that are in their 80s, kids that are in their teens, I always get the same reaction. I've never really had a negative reaction, and to me that's awesome. But let's give a walk around about the car, and I'll show you what the beauty of a 108 is. So I'll give you a quick walk around of the car. Obviously the body on this is incredibly clean. I've done nothing as far as cosmetically except you know, keeping the paint waxed once a year, and I do not drive it in moisture. Colorado is very dry naturally, but if it's raining, this does not get driven. If it's snowing, it does not get driven, and I think that has definitely contributed to the look of this as far as quality. If you are looking for one, you obviously want to look for rust right in this area. It's prone just over the years of, I think, dirt and moisture collect there. You also want to check in the trunk areas underneath the bottom areas right here. But I would say if you're looking for one, rust is the #1 factor, I would say, because I think that can be an uphill battle if you're not careful. And I'm very lucky with this one because it is essentially rust free. It was originally a California car, bought in San Francisco in '68, and it spent the majority of its life there, and then the other half of its life in Colorado towards the late '70s, early '80s. I'll pop the hood. You can see the chrome is one of my favorite parts about this. Don't judge too hard, the motor's a little dusty, but this is a 2.5 liter 6-cylinder. Some came with Weber carburetors, and this one has the mechanical fuel injection. Believe it or not, it's almost identical to the diesel injection that is on the common OM 617 engines. It's very close to it. It's not exact, obviously. Factory AC, this is the original radiator, but I mean, this motor runs, I've been driving this around, I can literally touch the engine. They run cool, and you inherently want these to run cool because heat is the death of an engine. They're very easy to work on. Your standard distributor, power steering reservoir, obviously your radiator. Spark plugs are very easy to change. I always keep a rag there in case you want to change the or check the oil. That's a big thing. Check the oil on these, change it often. I change mine religiously every 3,000. And believe it or not, I run a Shell Rotella diesel oil. People are like, what? Why would you do that? But because diesel oil inherently has more zinc, and that protects a lot of the valve train parts of the engine. It'll be a huge argument. You can go online and say, what oil should I run in this? And you're gonna have 50 different answers. I personally like Shell Rotella, and I run 2050 in it. It's cheap oil, yet very good quality. And changing it often is what makes it last. And I think that's with any motor. I think these people are doing these 10,000 mile oil changes. That's bananas, but that's just me. Mods that I've done on this, not really much. White walls. These bumpers weigh a ton. And why that is I replaced some bolts and I had to take this bumper off. And it's astronomical how much they weigh. I would not want to get hit by this car. Let's just put it that way. Give you a little tour of the inside. These are the original seats. Still has the horn. That's like my favorite part about this car is the horn. It's got that European sound. Still has, believe it or not, the AC and the heater still work. This thing has power windows, which is, for 1968, that's absolutely crazy to me. I don't even know how many other cars. If you know cars back in 68 that had electric power windows, post in the comments, because I'm actually genuinely curious what models they were, what years. To me, that's one of the most futuristic things in the 60s, is electric windows. The 94 Toyota has roll-up windows. Little tour of the back. As you can see, Inspector Nugget is quite comfortable back here. These cars are incredibly roomy. I think that's one of my favorite parts about these old Mercedes sedans is you can put all your friends in and go out on a Friday night. And every time I've showed up to a friend's house, like we're going out and there's 6 of us and everybody's piled in this and you have like that perfect sawn and you just feel like this car is in its element. Friday night in the city, and that never gets old to me. 10 years and doing that, going out with friends, and it never gets old, especially with this car. And pulling up to like the bar and you have front row parking and everybody's like, oh my god, that just doesn't get old. And it's so fun with these old cars because, you know, you have the guy that spends $250,000 on his Lamborghini and he shows up, and there's people that respect it, but then there's also people that are like, rich guy, what, you know, this guy's probably a douche. Not calling Lamborghini owners douche, I'm just saying that mentality. With this and driving this, I think one of my favorite parts is, like I said, the respect thing. You show up in this and everybody's like, wow, what year is that? And how do you know, how's it in such good shape? And I think to me that makes it all the more worth it to keep these classics going. There's a major respect value in these old vintage cars, and especially these old Benzes. I get a lot of respect out of my 68 Midget, and I'll do a video on that as well. But let's go for a cruise, and you can see what's like being a first-person view, I should say, of driving one of these classic Mercedes 108s. Otto literally is like, get me out of this car and play Frisbee already. So this has a 4-speed on the tree, as one would call it. Hey buddy, maybe I'll take you to the park if you keep behaving, because you're being pretty awesome. Now, I live at 6,000 feet, and so this is an NA, naturally aspirated 6-cylinder. So no, it's not going to win any races, of course not. But I believe the power on these on the book was 170 horse. For a 2.5 liter 6-cylinder, that's pretty remarkable in 1968. I believe Jaguar had a 4.2 liter 6-cylinder and it was maybe 40 more horse. I would say one of my favorite parts about this vehicle is the tightness of the steering wheel and how it goes over the bumps and the roads. It's very plush, incredibly plush. I think a factor to consider with these is just by simply updating, if you were to buy one of these, you're like, oh, it drives like crap. You hear this on the forums, like, oh, it's loose, it's sloppy. Replacing simple things like your control arm bushings, tie rod ends, new shocks, and bushings in any of the suspension areas completely change the perspective of how this car drives. I had the same issue. I was hitting bumps and something was clunking, the steering wheel felt loose, and I was like, man, this thing feels sloppy. Went through everything, replaced all the bushings, and it was night and day. It drove like a completely new car. And so if you do have one of these and you're telling yourself something is weird with this, it's not driving like it should, it's really sloppy, just replace the bushings. I'd say tie rod end and control arm bushings are a game changer in itself. The shifts on these are incredibly smooth. Mercedes transmissions are notorious for having a little kick when they shift, and that is a healthy sign. People are always taking these into the shop saying, oh, I need to adjust this thing, kicks a little bit when it shifts, especially noticeable between first and second gear. That's normal. They've always been notorious for having a little kick, and in fact, if yours kicks a little bit between shifts, that's a healthy sign that your transmission is in great working order. People would adjust these and make it where they're smooth, and then the transmissions would burn out over time. They're not meant to be a perfectly smooth shifting transmission. Even my 85 turbo diesel has a little kick in between shifts. Don't give me too much crap for that. I didn't use my turn signal. But I think the number one factor in owning one of these in a good condition is how smooth they are. This is an effortless driving car. I would say my MG is a little different about that. I can go down the highway on this and you'll see firsthand that you can essentially let go of the steering wheel. I don't advise that, but you can let go of the steering wheel and it's be completely hands-free, and it'll just track straight down the road, and it's smooth. You can hit bumps. I can't do that with the MG. In fact, if I hit one little bump, it's squirrely, and it's normal. Keep in mind that car is half the size this car is, but I think that's one thing that I really appreciate about these old Benzes is that their attention to detail and the quality. I don't think people give them enough credit. They often think, oh, an old Mercedes, I wouldn't want to touch that. I'll take a vintage Mercedes, hands down, over a new Mercedes. And that is for many factors. Simplicity, ease of working on them, and honestly, I think the build quality in these old Benzes is far superior than a new one. The new ones are amazing, and if I had the coin, I would love an SLS AMG. I think those are incredible. I gotta drive one and torque for days. Unbelievable car to drive, but I would not want to work on one. And working on this, you can almost do anything yourself. Valve cover gaskets take nothing but more than 20 minutes. Adjusting the air-fuel mixture on these is very easy. Changing the oil is easy. I like vehicles that are simplistic. My favorite video that I'll be posting soon is of my 85 Mercedes turbo diesel and how easy those are to work on. But yeah, I think every time I drive this car, I fall in love with it over and over. I never get tired of this car, and often friends ask, like, dude, you've had this car more than a decade. You're going on more than a decade, and it hasn't worn off. And I don't think it ever will be. You know, if you understand vintage cars, there's something about them how they kind of talk to you. And I feel with this car, over the years, it's talk to me in several ways. Classiness never dies out. And sometimes going fast is not the most important thing in life. You know, sometimes just cruising with your friends or your dog is the most important thing to do. But here, let's step on it and we'll see what you can get an idea of the fierce acceleration of one of these puppies. That's sarcasm, FYI. But she gets up to 60 pretty darn quick. A lot faster than you would, oh. Well, that guy came up a little fast, but that's all right. What do you think? Obviously, you know, here, step on it. You can see she does 80 effortlessly, but I'm also at 3,900 RPM. So like, but what I meant by driving is effortless on this, I literally can hold it 2 fingers and just tracks anywhere you want it. They're so nice to drive on the highway. I can't emphasize that enough, how enjoyable they are to cruise on the highway. And I mean, how many vintage Mercedes do you see cruising on the road these days? I think that's one factor that I never get tired of, is you never see these on the road. You hear about people like, you know, grandparents die off. That was a story with this, is that it was 1 a.m. I came across an online ad for this, and it was a kid's grandfather's, I should say the grandson was selling this. Didn't know how to get it running. I showed up, made him an offer, kind of lowballed him, and then it took me less than an hour to get it running. I just don't think a lot of people give these enough credit of how easy they are to get running. They still drive wonderfully on the highway and in the city. It never runs hot. Just basic maintenance is what will keep these running for another 50 years, in my opinion. But enough with me chit-chatting. I hope you enjoyed a quick little drive with my vintage 1968 Mercedes. And if there's more videos that you'd like to see, whether that's other vehicles I have or you want me to do other videos with this car, post them down up in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any questions about this car and anything about it, post them up. I love hearing the comments and all that. And don't forget to subscribe, and look forward to doing another video. I think I'm gonna do one with the turbo diesel wagon or the MG coming up. Obviously it's a little cold to have the top down, but you know, I'll make an exception. Thanks again, guys, and enjoy.